Hi guys, it's your local Holgate Ward Councillors here. I'm Callum Taylor.
I'm Rachel Melly.
I'm David Heaton.
And the reason why we're here is that we've put together a sort of slideshow video to try and explain what's going on with the potential closure of Leeman Road, which is something which we know residents are concerned about, and we know that residents have asked us to try and explain in a way that they can understand, because there's a lot of confusion out there. So we've put this video together. We hope it's useful. We hope you can stick with us as we go through the slides. Feel free to pause it at any point, go make yourself a brew, take notes, come back to it later on. This is here for you, so use it however you would like. So yeah, we'll dive in now, and hopefully it'll be worthwhile. And if you bear with me, I'm on the technology for this one. Almost there. So here we are, we're in the presentation. What's going on with the stopping up order and how is it going to affect residents? In this video, as we say, we'll explain why the road is facing closure, how the stopping up order decision making process works. We'll talk about the impacts of this decision and how you can object if you want to. The background behind this is that the Railway Museum want to expand their site across the width of Leeman Road. This is literally on top of the connection that they've already got underground. The new building will connect their two buildings over the road. They want to do this as part of their Vision 2025 to mark their 50th anniversary, but to do it, they need to get permission to close the road. Here are some artists' impressions of this so-called Great Hall. I'll get a fancy little laser up so you can see where Leeman Road is in this. So sort of slightly to the right, slightly to the top of the screen, in the middle-ish, you'll see where Leeman Road is in this artist's impression. And down in the corner on the bottom right, you'll see the lower part of the road. And in the middle, you've got the Great Hall. Inside here too is an artist's impression of what the innards of the building will look like. Quite fancy, but a little bit problematic in our view.
But this is about much more than just the National Railway Museum and their plans to expand. This is part of the much larger York Central development, the big plot of land between the train station and water end, known as the Teardrop site or York Central. The York Central Partnership are responsible for these plans for developing York Central, which is made up of the National Railway Museum, the City of York Council, Homes England and Network Rail. The York Central site is one of the biggest brownfield sites in the country. It has huge potential, it's very exciting, and it should be developed, especially when it's public land, but it should be for public good and to help improve the lives of local residents in the local community. But that's, in our view, not what's happening here. So why does this matter? Well, in return for land, which the Railway Museum have pledged to give to the York Central Partnership to support the development of the York Central site, the National Railway Museum are able to plan to build over the road as part of this arrangement. We haven't got the complete detailed plans for this yet. The York Central development now has outline planning permission from the council, but this was shamefully rushed through a couple of years ago, just before the local elections took place, on the basis that there was an approaching deadline for funding, but it turned out that wasn't true. Planning permission, though, doesn't decide on closing the road. To be able to close the highway, the National Railway Museum need permission from the government, from the Department for Transport. They do this by applying for a stopping up order, which they have now applied for. So what does this process of the stopping up order involve? Well, the Department for Transport run a 28-day objection period for anyone wanting to object to the order and stop it from being approved. This is open now. It opened on the 9th of June and it closes on the 7th of July at midnight. So this is your chance to voice your concerns if you have them. Any objections that you send to the Department for Transport are passed on to the applicant to try and resolve. Any that are not resolved, that the Department for Transport think are reasonable objections, then instead of the order being improved, there'll be a public inquiry into the stopping up order.
So, if it happens, what's going to be the impact of the closing of Leeman Road? Well, if they go ahead with their plans, there'll be a huge impact on local residents in terms of both daily inconvenience and in lost time. Now, this applies in different ways across pedestrians, cyclists and motorists, but we're going to start by looking at pedestrians and cyclists. So, as things stand, if you access the city centre from Leeman Road area by foot or by bike, you have two options. The first is along the riverside route from the end of Jubilee Terrace. The second is along Leeman Road itself, which is slightly longer at 0.7 miles with a bit of a slope. Now, the new journey options. If the order's approved, there'll be three potential routes. The first will be to continue down the riverside route. The second will be up Leeman Road. That's the same 0.7 miles, but it's only when the NRM's new building is open, and it can potentially be outside of commuting time. The third option is a longer route through the new development and around the National Railway Museum, with barrier crossings closing twice a day.
Now, there's a number of issues with these future options. Firstly, the Riverside route, which many residents love and enjoy for most of the year, it does have its issues. So it's poorly lit of an evening. There's no CCTV. It's quite narrow even for current levels of use, and it's regularly cut off due to the floods that we often have in this city, but even minor floods seem to take this route out of order. Despite the above, and we've made these points a number of times, there's been no commitments to improving this route as some sort of compromise, which is a massive shame, because the outcome of these plans will see this route be the only genuinely 24 hours a day route that's left for residents getting to and from the city centre, and that's assuming it's not flooded. Some pictures there, which I'm sure many residents will be used to seeing. The other route, which is going through Leeman Road and the museum's new building, but only when it's open, as said, is unavailable for most of the day. Cyclists are going to have to dismount when they get to the new building so they don't bash into the museum's visitors. And there'll be lots of awkward moments around the opening hours. Will they let you through if you get there a few seconds after closing? What if they're not open in time? How will that impact on your journey and your day? There's also no guarantee about the museum's future charging policy and how that might impact on people just trying to pass through. There's also issues with the longer route through the new development and around the museum's new building. This is being touted as the alternative for pedestrians and cyclists, but it's double the length of the Riverside route. And as mentioned, it's going to have two railway lines running across it for the museum to give residents a sort of train ride experience. And these rail lines will see this route closed twice a day at a barrier crossing. These closures will take place at the start and end of each day too. And this route, in the early years, once the museum opens, will still be going through the building site of this wider York Central development. Some maps here to illustrate the impact for pedestrians and cyclists on the route. The arrow points to where Leeman Road is closed, and all the sort of yellow lines show what routes will be left for pedestrians and cyclists. We zoom in a little bit here, where we can see the route around the museum into the new development, and how it crosses over the two railway lines here for the museum's exhibition train. They'll be closed twice a day.
So, in summary, if the order to close the road is approved and the Rail Museum go ahead with their plans, the result for pedestrians and cyclists will be a significant increase in the reliance of the riverside route. No access down Leeman Road for potentially 17 hours a day, and an even longer alternative route, which again is still working around the Railway Museum's operations and its barrier being shut twice a day. There will be no public right of way through the Railway Museum.
So that brings us to the impact on car users. Now, this isn't quite as straightforward as the previous ones we've looked at. Your current journey options. Currently, there are two. Firstly, you can go out Salisbury Road onto Water End and either turn left towards Holgate Road or turn right over the bridge towards Bootham. Alternatively, you can use the Kingsland Terrace route onto Leeman Road and through in that direction. Now, things that car users should bear in mind. Firstly, there will be a new route that goes around the Leeman Road area. It is slightly longer. It'll connect Water End and the city centre. It'll have access to Leeman Road as well, near the Gatehouse building, just off Kingsland Terrace. Now, obviously, how much longer it'll take will depend on traffic flow. Currently, there's the potential for 2,500 homes on the site, let alone the business traffic that could potentially be coming in. On top of that, you've got the potential for CYC making Marble Arch Tunnel a single controlled one-way system, and there's also the potential for traffic being restricted from accessing the new road via Kingsland Terrace. On here, once again, this time in blue for the traffic, you can see the area where Leeman Road will be closed, and you can see along the bottom, along what's called Park Street there, that is the new spine road from Water End round to the Marble Arch Tunnel. And if we move on, we can zoom in and see the area that's going to be a particular problem area potentially. This is the area around Kingsland Terrace that may or may not be open for people to access the new spine road from the Leeman Road Island.
And this is where we start to look at what the future options for car users might look like. The best we can do is summarise it into three possible outcomes, A, B and C, for the benefit of this video. For outcome A, this scenario is where there are no restrictions placed at Kingsland Terrace. So people who want to access the city centre can still do so via the Leeman Road Island where Kingsland Terrace is. And the two options in this case would be Salisbury Road onto Water End to go on to Bootham, Holgate Road, or the new access road, which will come off Millennium Green, or, as mentioned, Kingsland Terrace onto this new connection for the new access road. Outcome B is a situation where there are full restrictions on traffic trying to access the city centre via Kingsland Terrace. If full restrictions are put in, then the only option in and out of the island area will be Salisbury Road onto Water End to those other routes as mentioned before. Outcome C is a bit more nuanced, and this covers a situation where there are restrictions on some types of traffic coming through the Leeman Road area. In this case, you'll still have the Salisbury Road onto Water End option. And for those traffic types which aren't restricted, then that could be resident, buses, taxis, delivery services, the emergency services, or a combination of those. Those types of traffic which aren't restricted can still use Kingsland Terrace to get onto the access road to get into the city centre.
But will the plans reduce traffic in the Leeman Road Island area? This is something that quite a few residents have asked us about. It might end up being the case that this does reduce the amount of traffic, but it's not guaranteed and it's not straightforward either. So let's have a deeper look at this. The logic here is, if the plans go ahead, most of the traffic which now runs through between Leeman Road and Salisbury Road will instead use the new access road up to Water End. Callum was just describing this as outcome A. So, but this depends on how congested this new access road will be and the traffic calming measures in place. If traffic levels are bad and there's a lot of congestion, people may well turn off and go up Kingsland Terrace and through the island area. This is the bit on the map here that you can see. You can see that traffic can come along Park Street, but if that's very congested, people may turn right and go up there onto Kingsland Terrace and through the island area. The only certain way to reduce traffic through the island would be to restrict it so that you can't get to the city centre via Kingsland Terrace, as Callum just explained, outcomes B or C. Again, this isn't straightforward and there would be knock-on effects. Full restriction would essentially eliminate all traffic from driving through the island to get to the city centre, leaving Salisbury Road as the only access road for people living and working on the island estate. Partial restrictions would reduce, but obviously not eliminate traffic from this area, meaning that Kingsland Terrace would be an access point as well as Salisbury Road. In both cases, while not all traffic would be diverted, a significant amount would be. So that would go on top of what we already see now around Bootham, Holgate Road, Water End. These are roads which already have heavy traffic levels and congestion. Another consideration to be aware of is that there are local businesses in the island area, and some of them have already expressed concern about the loss of passing trade. They rely on people passing through the area and stopping off to support our local businesses.
So, we've talked about cars, pedestrians, cyclists, but what about buses? Now, we've listened to residents and we know many are anxious to know what this whole situation will mean for those services. Critically, this is not part of the order. We know that many residents in the area, particularly those who may be older, may have mobility issues, rely on those. Now, York Central Partnership say that buses will still serve the area, but the devil's going to be in the detail, and the detail hasn't emerged yet. Current services, for our view, aren't enough as it is, and we simply can't have further reductions of those services.
So to summarise, there's quite a lot to take in. It's not straightforward. As you'll have seen in this video, there's lots of things to consider and some things that we still just don't know. And all these things need to be taken into account and you want to weigh them up. We appreciate that lots of residents have different views and different concerns about the different impacts these plans could have. But whatever your views on the matter, at the very least, we genuinely hope that this has been helpful for you and has helped to provide clarity on the situation.
Now, speaking of clarity, for even more of that, we want to be totally clear in saying that as councillors, we will be lodging an objection to the stopping up order application. We've opposed these plans for as long as we've been councillors based on the concerns that residents have raised with us. And over the last 2 years, we've tried every other route, consultations, committees, workshops, a petition of over 1,600 signatures to try and improve the plans or secure compromises, and these efforts have been ignored. So, given that we've had no changes, we know where we are. On balance, for us, the negatives are more definite and more in number. The alternative routes are problematic for the reasons we've cited. The potential argument around traffic relief for the island area, we don't think is reliable. And depending on how that is handled, it could force most of the current traffic that we see elsewhere into Holgate and beyond. The thousands of daily inconveniences that this will cause for local residents is just not worth one institution's non-essential plans to expand. It's bang out of order, and the Railway Museum, as our neighbours and the York Central Partnership, should know better.
So, to emphasise, as a community, this is our last chance to try and force a rethink here. Here you can see a picture of the Keep Us Connected campaign, which was set up in 2018 by councillors, local residents and residents of the wider Holgate community. That was simply brushed aside. This is our last opportunity to really change these plans. Now, if you decide to object, there are two final options. Firstly, it can be approved, or if reasonable objections are not resolved by the York Central Partnership, it can go to a public inquiry for further investigation. Here, it can either be approved with modifications and conditions, or it can simply not be approved. So, if you've sat through this and you think you'd like to object, you need to send your response to the Department for Transport. The deadline is midnight on Tuesday the 7th of July. The email there is nationalcasework@dft.gov.uk. You also have a postal address for the National Transport Casework team. And please note, you must include the reference below that you can see in red there. That makes sure that your objection is recorded properly. A paper copy of the detailed plans can also be viewed at the Micklegate Post Office if you so wish.
Thanks for watching. We hope this has been helpful. If you still have questions or would like some more clarification, please do get in touch. Our email addresses and telephone numbers are on the screen now. And if there's anything else that you'd like to get in touch with us about, please do. If you've got a problem that we might be able to help with, or if you have any ideas of how to improve the local area, get in touch. We're here to represent you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thank you very much.